So today's class is the third class in this series on anxiety. And in the class, as you can see here, we're going to do a little mindfulness meditation. 3 key words for us as human beings that I'd like us to always remember, but especially when we're being stressed out or we're feeling anxious, is to take some deep breaths and just go grounded, centered, and balanced. Grounded and centered and balanced. You know, kind of like the way someone who does Tai Chi or Aikido or even a boxer, what they would do before they enter the ring, and their emotions could get away from them, is to be grounded and centered and balanced. So we're going to do a little mindfulness exercise. Then we're going to take a look at, we talk about avoidance, and when we feel anxious, it's natural that we try to avoid these feelings. But what we're learning in this class is that the problem is not anxiety. The problem that has developed is what we're doing to make the anxiety go away. That becomes the problem. I think we're all learning that. So we're going to take a look at a 7-question questionnaire, like how comfortable am I with my feelings and my pain and my anxiety? Am I trying to avoid it and push the beach ball underwater, or am I comfortable with it? Then we're going to take a look at, you know, there's that saying that I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. A lot of you have heard that saying, right? Mm-hmm. We're going to take a look at what has my anxiety cost me, the way that I've handled it. The way that I've let my anxiety run my life. What does it cost me in 7 different dimensions of our lives? Then we're going to do a quick run through of the basics of ACT therapy. Then we're going to do 22 minutes with Dr. Hayes. And then we're going to do a little bit of a wrap up and talk about how all of us, we want to validate ourselves, we want to acknowledge ourselves, and we want to hold ourselves with respect. That it's okay that we respect ourselves and we deserve a good life. Then we're going to talk about living by intention. That rather than having our feelings run our life, what runs our life is our intention, the vision that we have for the kind of person we want to be. So let's go ahead and we'll just do a really brief, like 1.5 minute exercise right now to get grounded and centered and balanced. And this is just a little practice right now. So if you go ahead and have 2 feet on the ground and sit up straight in your chair so that, you know, your core muscles are holding you up. And go ahead and close your eyes, or if you'd rather just look down at the floor, go ahead and look down at the floor. And then just go ahead and breathe naturally. Go ahead and just breathe. And now pay attention to your breath going in and out. Let go of any other thoughts and focus your attention on your breath going in and going out. So you're focusing your attention on your breath. And if you notice that your mind starts to wander, that's just natural. And you just say, oh, my mind is wandering right now. I'm going to bring it back to my breath. And now just breathe in and out and focus on your breath. And now, a couple of things that I'd like you to repeat to yourself. You don't need to do it out loud. Just say it internally to yourself. The first one is, I'm me and I'm okay. I'm me and I'm okay. I tend to be kind of an anxious person, and that's okay. I tend to be kind of an anxious person, and that's okay. I want to remember to stay grounded, centered, and balanced. So say this to yourself. I want to remember to stay grounded and centered and balanced. And then lastly, I want to respond rather than react. I want to respond rather than react. Okay, go ahead and open your eyes, you guys. So that's just a little mindfulness exercise that can really help us be more in touch with who we are, be okay with who we are, be comfortable in our own skin, huh? Anxiety is very much about not being comfortable in our own skin. Not comfortable in the world, not comfortable in our own skin. So, although we can't just do a 1.5-minute breathing exercise, and it's like taking a big 5-pound Valium and 3 beers and everything's fine, right? But practicing this every day, several times a day, gradually, we can start to be more comfortable in our own skin and more comfortable in the world. So, let's turn the page, and up at the top it says AAQ2. It's a little survey, AAQ2. And there are 7 questions I'd like us to go through right now. And you can go 1, which is never, seldom, sometimes, frequently. 6 is almost always true, and 7 is always true. So just evaluate yourself. And this is not about judging ourselves, it's just kind of seeing who we are today. So the first question, ask yourself this. My painful experiences and memories make it difficult for me to live a life that I value. Is that never, seldom, frequently true, always true? Number 2, I'm afraid of my feelings. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Just evaluate yourself. I'm afraid of my feelings. Wherever you're at today is just where you're at. It's okay. Number 3, I worry about not being able to control my worries and feelings. So is that something that you worry about? Not being able to control your worries and your feelings. Number 4, my painful memories prevent me from living a fulfilling life. My painful memories prevent me from leading a fulfilling life. Is that like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? Question number 5, emotions cause problems in my life. Emotions cause problems in my life. Think about that and answer that, please. Number 6, it seems like most people are handling their lives better than I am. So think about that for a minute. It seems like most people are handling their lives better than I am. And then the last question is, worries get in the way of my success. Worries get in the way of my success. So now you've just spent a few minutes looking at your life and being honest, and then depending on how you answered this, it gives you an idea about your relationship with anxiety and also some painful feelings. It helped you see that, hey, I've really grown a lot. I can tolerate painful feelings, so I can tolerate my anxiety. Or I realize anxiety's not a problem, and I can just go ahead and be with it, or I can feel it. Or maybe you answered questions and you go, wow, anxiety is really a big boogeyman in my life. It scares me to death. And I try to push it underwater like a beach ball, and I try to run away from it, and I try to avoid it. I try to do everything I can so that I won't be anxious. So that's what this evaluation, I'm sure you did a really nice job of evaluating yourself where you're at. It's important that we just start with that we know where we're at. And of course the goal is that as we grow and develop, our anxiety has less power over us. It has less control over us. Now what that means is, you guys, when we're growing with our anxiety, what that means is that doesn't necessarily mean we have less anxiety. When we're growing with our anxiety, what that means is we still might be as anxious as ever, but it's not making the decisions for us. It's not telling me how I'm going to live my life, my intentions and my values. To be a good, healthy, loving human being, to be a dad, to be a mom, to be a friend, to be a volunteer, to work, to do what I need to do in my life to make my life better and other people's lives better. My anxiety doesn't diminish my life and trap me. I can still feel anxious, but I'm out there doing it anyway. It's kind of like that cliche in recovery where people say, feel the fear and do it anyway. I also talk with you guys about Nike therapy, huh? Be aware of your feeling, but then boom, just do it. Because there's something greater than ourselves that we want to achieve. We're sick and tired of being trapped by our anxiety. We want a bigger life than that. Because of that, we're willing to feel our anxiety and go ahead and go out and do those things and be a part of life that we would like to be a part of. Okay, so let's turn the page. And I mentioned earlier we are going to take a look at 7 dimensions of living. And we want to do an inventory right now. We want to do an evaluation of ourselves and say, well, looking back on my life in the last year, the last 5 years, maybe, gosh, since I was in kindergarten or since I was a sophomore in high school, how has my anxiety really kind of said, oh, don't do that, don't go there, or it's driven us with perfectionism, and we're going to be taking a look at this a lot more in the class next week, these things that cause this. But the first dimension is social. Think about your social life. Has your anxiety caused you to avoid social relationships? Have you lost friends or spouses or children because of your anxiety? Go ahead and think about that. Sometimes anxiety affects our ability to be intimate. We're afraid of being open and vulnerable with someone and getting close to someone. So we keep people at a distance because we're afraid of getting hurt again. We're anxious about getting hurt. And sometimes spouses will say, I can't take this anymore. You're never available to me. Or maybe we never even got married because we're so afraid of getting close. Or sometimes we can be strangers with our children because we're anxious about being vulnerable and sharing with them. So maybe we were good providers or we cooked good dinners for them, but we didn't really share with them because we were so anxious about who we were. We weren't good enough. We're not comfortable sharing our feelings. How has it affected our friendships? Have we been able to form good friendships and maintain those? So that's the social dimension. So we want to ask ourselves, what has it cost me letting my anxiety run my life? Number 2, what about career? Have you quit a job because you were anxious? Or have you been fired because your performance was not as good? Because you were so anxious with doing the work or doing it perfectly or being around customers or being around coworkers? Were you less creative? Were you afraid to take risks at work? And so you never really grew and developed, and people never got to see what a great employee you were and what a great creative person you were. So you didn't live up to your potential. How many of us here have said, oh my gosh, my anxiety has just put a big lid on my potential. I was so afraid of failing. I was so afraid of being laughed at. I was so afraid of being a failure or making a mistake that I never put myself out there. Or sometimes we're afraid of accepting responsibility. So our anxiety has us not say, yeah, I'll volunteer to do that. I'll take on that project. You can count on me. Because again, we're afraid of all those things. So just check in with yourself. Again, this is not about judging ourselves or beating ourselves up. We just want to know what's true for us. And the truth will set us free. Knowing what's true about ourselves is where we all start. Number 3, has your anxiety, has it made you sick? With your stomach, with gastrointestinal problems, with headaches, with heart palpitations, with stiff muscles? Anxiety really causes us to either have insomnia, where we can't fall asleep and we wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, or hypersomnia, where we hide under the covers like 16 or 18 hours a day. Also, some of us have used alcohol or marijuana, or we've abused medications like benzodiazepines, or we've smoked cigarettes, or we overate to deal with our anxiety. We ended up having health problems as a result of that. What next dimension, number 4, personal energy. Think about that for a minute. Has your anxiety like exhausted you? Has it fatigued you? Have you planned your life around, I can't go there because I'm anxious, I can't do that because I'm anxious, so you burn up all this energy before you even get out the door in the morning. You end up going back to bed. Has your anxiety affected your concentration or your memory? When our mind is going so fast, all of a sudden our concentration's not very good, our memory's not very good, so we don't do well in interviews, we don't do well talking with people. We have a hard time taking tests because our concentration, our memory's impaired, because we're stumbling all over ourselves. Number 5, emotional cost. What has your anxiety cost you emotionally? Has your anxiety led you to feel greater sadness because of you've been trapped in your life? Or has your anxiety caused you to be depressed? Because again, our lives can get so diminished, we go, what kind of a life is this am I leading? Because my anxiety I kept saying no to this and no to this and no to this and no to myself, and I've got this tiny little life. And so we're depressed or we're grieving. We say, who wants a life like that? Have we been edgy and all keyed up? Have we been really stressed out? Have we had meltdowns? Have you gotten to the point because of your anxiety, whether it's PTSD or OCD or general anxiety or social phobia, of really feeling discouraged or even feeling hopeless, where you said, what's the use? I can't, this is controlling me, I'm going to cash it in. The heck with it, I'm not going to go on any longer. Has that happened with you? Number 6, what about financial costs? What has your anxiety cost you financially? In terms of the amount of time and energy and money that you spent trying to control your anxiety. Maybe buying alcohol or marijuana or benzodiazepines or opiates or cigarettes or a whole bunch of food. Again, we talked earlier about how some of us might have lost jobs because of our anxiety. Maybe we spent a whole lot of money on therapy. We spent a whole lot of money on doctors. We spent a whole lot of money on self-help books. Or did we go out and spend a lot of money on gambling? That's one of the ways that we dealt with our anxiety. Is you get in front of that slot machine and just keep pumping money in there and you zone out. And your anxiety's gone for an hour or two. Have you had to pay for family counseling or anger management because of your anxiety? Have you had to move from one job to another? Or has your anxiety had you making a geographic cure where you picked everything up and moved to the other side of town or another state or even out of the country? Because of your anxiety, have you had to apply for disability? You've actually become disabled by your anxiety. So what are the financial costs to you? Again, this is not about judging ourselves. It's just about looking at ourselves in the mirror, like Viktor Frankl would say, face our fate without flinching and saying, okay, without judging myself or beating myself up, who am I right now? We started off the meditation saying, I'm okay just the way I am. And that's true right now as we answer these questions. We don't want to put ourselves down. It's just like, this is who I have been, and this is who I am. And then dimension number 7, the last one. What has your anxiety cost you in terms of your freedom? Some people have to stop driving. They can't drive. Some people can't go shopping. They can't go shopping by themselves, or they can't go shopping during regular business hours. Some people can't take a train, or some people can't take a plane. Some people can't go out and go for a walk. Some people can't go to a restaurant, or go to an art museum, or go to a concert. Some people can't come to a class. So we want to say, what has my anxiety cost me in terms of my freedom? Again, because anxiety will box us in, won't it? It'll box us in as we say, oh, I can't go there, I can't do this because I'll feel anxious, and I have to avoid that feeling of anxiety at all costs. So You guys, through your own courage right now, you just took a good, honest inventory of yourself. And what has my anxiety cost me? Now again, the intention of this is not that we get down on ourselves or beat ourselves up, but that we take an honest evaluation and say, wow, I've never really looked at this before, but anxiety has really run my life. It's cost me a lot. Then another thing that happens mentally and emotionally sometimes, we almost kind of hit a bottom and we go, man, I got to do something about this. You know, I'm only 25 years old, or I'm only 35 years old, or I'm only 65 years old. I got a lot of good years left in me. I have to learn how to have my anxiety without my anxiety having me. So again, these classes are not about making our anxiety go away. They're about how can I live with my anxiety? How can I live a really good, valuable life, even though I feel anxious? How can I have my anxiety without my anxiety having me? So, right now, we're going to put Dr. Steve Hayes up on the video, and we're going to hear the founder of ACT Therapy talk with us about these principles. You'll also see in the middle of this, Dr. Hayes does a meditation. You'll see that I sat in my chair as the interviewer, and I did that along with him. And I would ask you to do that, follow Dr. Hayes and go right along with him if you want to, okay? We're very glad to have you with us here today. We're going to be talking about anxiety. You may have struggled with anxiety. Maybe a family member or a friend has struggled with anxiety. So we're going to take a look at what is anxiety, and then we're going to take a look at a very powerful perspective on dealing with anxiety, the perspective of acceptance and commitment therapy. So we hope that you'll stay with us today, and I'm sure you'll learn a lot about this topic. We have a great guest, Dr. Stephen Hayes. Dr. Hayes, this is his fourth time back at the show. It's great to have Dr. Hayes here. He is a foundation professor in the psychology department at the University of Nevada, Reno. He is also the co-founder of Acceptance and Commitment Therapy and the author of this book, Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life, which is an excellent introductory workbook for dealing with anxiety and depression and substance abuse and a number of challenges that we can face in our life. So, Steve, it's great to have you back here to New Skills.
Great to be back with you, Tom.
Yeah. So, Steve, let me just kind of ask you that obvious first question. If you could share with us from an ACT perspective, what is anxiety?
Anxiety is not just a simple emotion, it's a collection of thoughts, feelings, and urges. It originally came, as you know, from a word that meant to have a difficulty in breathing.
Yes.
And inside that collection of thoughts, feelings, bodily sensations are things that may be useful to learn about. But what it pulls from us normally is this kind of problem-solving approach where we need to get rid of it, diminish it, run away from it. And a lot of problems that we have with anxiety are really not the problems from the anxiety itself, or the thoughts or the bodily sensations that come along with that emotion, but from all the damage that we do to our lives when we try to run away rather than experience it and see what's inside it. And then be able to shift our attention towards things that are more important in our life, such as what we really care about and what we want to create. So that's our approach, is to take the time to see what's there and then to be able to shift towards what's important.
So, Steve, are you saying that anxiety is not the problem? The problem is the ways that we've tried to remove the anxiety that ends up creating the problem. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. When people come in with an anxiety disorder, it's really a kind of avoidance and entanglement disorder in which anxiety is getting to be more and more central. It's taking more and more of our attention, more and more of our time. And as we try to get rid of it, we often threaten ourselves. If this doesn't go away, terrible things are going to happen. And the normal reaction to something terrible about to happen is to feel anxious.
Yes.
And so it turns out that anxiety is something to be anxious about. So it tends to self-perpetuate and to actually grow and take more of your attention rather than to become smaller and less important part of your life.
So Steve, as a psychologist, what are some of the ways that you've seen people, like in a maladaptive way, try to control or run away from their anxiety? What do we do when we're doing that?
Well, we withdraw from social opportunities, let's say, because they might be too frightening. We try to live life very small or very quietly, sort of metaphorically. We may use alcohol or drugs to try to dampen down the experience and sort of embolden ourselves, but then at a cost. And we may refuse to take promotions or to rise to opportunities as they come along because, that's just not for me, or that makes me too anxious. And over time, anxiety begins to demand more and more. As you feed it in that way, it will grow, and eventually it's taking things that are very central to functioning. You may be unable to travel or to go out with your kids or to visit your friends or be on the phone, or at the most severe level, it'll take away almost everything.
Yeah. So, Steve, if I'm hearing, so it's not so much the anxiety that diminishes our life, it's what we do to try to control or avoid the anxiety that diminishes our life.
I think we have a lot of reasons to believe now, and it's not just ACT. I think a lot of the more modern therapies realize that it's not our emotions, thoughts, and sensations that are the key issue. It's our relationship to them. And we really need to focus on how we're learning to feel what we feel, think what we think, in a way that takes what is of use in it. Because sometimes there's things inside anxiety that tell us things that we need to learn. If you're about to go home with somebody who's unsafe, you want to feel anxiety. If you're about to do something that's unwise, you want to feel anxiety. And in this kind of numbing down that we do, sometimes we lose the benefits of anxiety, and we end up making bad decisions as a result. But then as we relate to this in a different way, we have the chance to, with our anxiety, step forward towards what we really care about. And that's really what life is about anyway.
So, Steve, so what you were saying is that we need to be wrapping up here, though, is that as we let our thoughts and our feelings come up, we really listen to them, and then we determine what type of action we would like to take based on our values.
Exactly. I mean, you may feel anxious in a moment because it has something to do with your history. It may remind you of something that was painful in the past. Your past is not your enemy. Your past is your source of wisdom, so you want to be able to access that.
All right. Well, Steve, this time has gone so fast, and we'll continue talking with Dr. Stephen Hayes right after this brief break. Hello, and welcome back to New Skills for Living. You'll see up on your screen the website, www.easeap.com, where you will be able to see Dr. Hayes' interview and streaming video. Dr. Hayes also has 3 other interviews on that website and streaming video, as well as other ACT therapists like Jacqueline Pistorello, Victoria Follett, Jennifer Plum, Kelly Wilson. So also on that website, you'll be able to access over 90 newsletters that will talk about various aspects of dealing with anxiety, depression, relationships, substance abuse, raising children, and these newsletters are all free to you and to your friends. So let's go ahead now and turn our attention to Dr. Hayes and continue talking about how we can have our anxiety without our anxiety having us. And so, Steve, as we were talking about, mindfulness is such an important part of acceptance and commitment therapy. And I'd ask you if you were willing to kind of guide us through, because so many of us have heard about mindfulness, but we really don't know what it is. Yeah. Would you go ahead and guide us through a mindfulness type practice, Steve?
Yeah, I'd be very willing to do that. And this is one, if I could just give it an orientation, that sort of shows that even when you're struggling with anxiety, there's a wiser part of you. So without even having to sort of say what to do, I'm going to try to do something that will open up some wisdom within that will tell you what to do based on what you already know.
Okay.
Let's just see if we can do that.
Okay.
So if I could ask people at home
to
pick something that they've struggled with in the area of anxiety, and to sort of think about what it is they're going to focus on, and then to get themselves in a comfortable place.
So, and Steve, so that might be, they might struggle with like fear of rejection.
Exactly.
An upcoming job interview, an upcoming date, like what's something that arouses anxiety, huh?
Exactly. And it would be especially good if you pick something where there's some self-judgment, some self-blame, but there's also some emotions that go with it.
Okay.
So if I could ask that people get themselves seated in a place where they're comfortable and to close their eyes.
Okay, I'll do it along with you.
Awesome. And then to start out in the world of sensation, because that's what's in the now. And simply to notice what it feels like to sit where you're sitting. If you're sitting in some piece of furniture, notice where you touch that furniture. And just go inside your body and kind of, as if you're almost like drawing a diagram of where your body touches the thing you're touching. And then you might take a breath and notice the temperature of the air coming in, and notice it's a little different than the temperature of the air going out. And then to notice that there's a part of you that just noticed those sensations. There's a person behind those eyes of yours. And your body didn't notice itself touching the chair, and your breath didn't notice itself. You noticed your breath in your body. And so then what I'd like you to do is get in touch with that anxiety. Actually go from that perspective or point of view, that part of you that watches and observes, and find this issue and metaphorically kind of put it on your lap. And just kind of let it sit there as a collection of feelings that you have, thoughts that you have, urges that you have. And then I want you to take that sense of looking at these things and have it metaphorically leave your body. And you actually are now standing in front of yourself, looking at yourself, sitting there, remembering and looking at, sensing and feeling and thinking these things that are painful. What do you think about that person in front of you? Is this a whole person there? And then as you look at yourself sitting there with this issue, go over to the side of the room where you are and look at yourself from that point of view. You know what's going on the inside, but notice what's on the outside. Would other people be able to see that there's struggles that you have? And what do you feel about that person you're looking at? Knowing what's going on inside you. And then suddenly you realize that you're not looking at yourself. This is a memory. It's now 10 years from now. Life has gone on and unfolded in a good, healthy way, and you've become wiser, and you're remembering this moment when you were feeling so anxious, you were sitting here struggling, and you can picture that time when you sort of pictured yourself from the side of the room. And actually see, don't just think about this, but see yourself sitting there with this painful issue from 10 years from now. And the question I have for you is, if this could actually happen, what wisdom would you want to pass on across those 10 years to yourself right now? Seeing that struggle, seeing that suffering, seeing that person that you are, what would you like to, if you could write a little note across the ages, what would it be? And then remembering that note, let's come back across the room, back, take another look at yourself sitting there, and then inside your body again, remembering what you just said to yourself about all these struggles. And we'll take that anxiety, we'll pick it off your lap, we'll put it where you are, and then when you're ready, just come out and open your eyes.
That was good. That was a good exercise. I really like that.
So maybe when we come back together, I could find out what you had to say to yourself, Tom.
So my little note to myself was, as I was encountering that anxiety, was, don't be afraid.
Neat.
Don't be afraid. And I also felt compassion for myself.
Exactly.
Because I was struggling with this and I was doing the best I could do. But I think with the compassion, I really transcended it, Steve. And so we'll go ahead and wrap up for now, huh?
And then maybe we can unpack it in the next segment.
Okay. So we'll join you right after this brief break. Hello and welcome back. Let's continue talking with Dr. Steve Hayes, Foundation Professor from the University of Nevada, Reno. So Steve, take it from here, okay?
Well, all I really did there was ask you to look at yourself with a sense of perspective as a whole person.
Yeah.
And inside the struggle, you disappear into all these judgmental thoughts and what you're supposed to do and how you're going to solve your problem. If you simply find a part of you that's more aware, step out, look at yourself.
Yeah.
I did it with person as if you're another person,
Yeah.
with space as
Yeah.
if you're looking from across the room, and with time.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing we do when we look at the suffering of others. If you look at a child who's suffering, you don't judge them.
Mm-hmm.
If you find out that people elsewhere in the world are suffering, you don't criticize them. And yet the very same things within us is a source of all kinds of finger wagging and shame and blame. So what I was trying to do is bring this kind of sense of consciousness and wholeness. And what seems to show up very natural is a kinder, gentler, more self-compassionate approach that is encouraging and supportive of our values, but doesn't judge us so severely about having painful experience that are going to go along the journey with us.
Yeah. You know, Steve, as you were walking us through that, for myself, I noticed one of the things while you're doing the perspective, at first there was the drama of the anxiety, the drama of what was going on. And when you led us through that perspective orientation, along with having just more compassion for myself as a human being struggling with this issue, the drama kind of deflated as well. And I guess there was a sense of diffusion there.
You know, the part of the drama is that there's going to be winners and losers, and you're going to pick the winners and losers.
Yeah.
But this is a kind of self-fractionation. It's as if only part of you can win, part of you has to lose. If you instead are simply able to hold yourself in consciousness, then there's a wholeness that's there. All of you, including painful parts of your history that show up in the form of anxiety and so forth. And that way, the kind of selfish parts within us don't steal our moments. These anxious thoughts and feelings try to steal our moments.
Yeah, they do.
And at their worst, they will take our whole life.
Yeah.
They'll say our whole life is about that.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, we have children to raise and spouses to love and fun to be had and contributions to be made.
Yeah.
And it's too high a cost. So if we can get back to the whole of us and sort of dampen down that selfish part of us, you may not think of it that way, but these feelings are very sort of self-centered. They want to grab all your moments and sort of feed off your life.
And the self-compassion, Steve, don't you find that it kind of gets us back in touch with our values, and then we want to live our values. We want to say yes to life and get moving. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
I think it's a natural thing. I mean, once we sort of show up here and we're no longer waiting for our life to start when we get fixed or repaired, well, then the next thing was, well, then what am I going to do? And I think it's that you get to do really what you care about. That's how you get to spend your moments. And if we can move fairly quickly from trying to win these wars within to instead trying to get with all of these reactions and see what's useful about them, and then shift our attention towards that, that has a deeply empowering message, which is our life can start now, and we don't have to wait. We're not broken. We don't have to be repaired. We can take our anxieties and our fears and our self-judgments as just one of many reactions we're having and move our attention towards the people that we love and the life that we want to live.
Yeah. Now, again, very briefly, we may not have enough time in this segment, but we only got about a minute. But, of course, in this book, there are, Steve was talking about values, and in Steve's book, there is an inventory back here where you take a look at various dimensions of life, like what do you really care about in terms of your health, your family, your community, your education, your career. In about 30 seconds, Steve, can you kind of summarize?
Well, often we put those things on hold, you notice. When we're fighting the war within, we sort of have this illusion that when the war is won, then we can start living. And these central questions of what do you really want get put on the shelf. So let's take them down off the shelf. Let's look at those questions right now and look within and find the places that bring us vitality, meaning, and purpose right in our lives, right here, right now.
Yeah, that's excellent, Steve. Thank you for that summary. And we'll join you right after this brief break. We'll continue talking with Dr. Hayes. Hello and welcome back. We're going to continue talking with Dr. Hayes about ending the struggle with anxiety and then also talk about compassion. So, Steve, could you go ahead and share with us your wisdom and your perspective about the importance of self-compassion and compassion for others?
Well, really, the essence of what we've been talking about, Tom, is self-compassion, of taking a kinder approach to yourself that's more open and aware, and that connects you to your common humanity with others. And when we step back and kind of look at yourself, that's part of what you're doing. It's the same thing that's involved when you look at the suffering that's going on around the world and you imagine, what would it be like to be in that person's shoes? And you kind of remember, that's a human being, and taking a kind of kinder approach to it. So these are two sides of the same coin. Self-compassion helps you to be with an increasingly difficult and painful world in many ways, because we constantly know what's happening around the world, and the Newtowns and the Auroras, and in the wars across the world, and the suffering that people are going through. And I think in the modern world we can't avoid that. We simply cannot pretend as though we're living isolated. And these anxiety struggles, ironically, kind of pull us into this kind of alienated, isolated place. We can take what we're learning in self-compassion, which is good for us, helps us carry the weight of anxiety, and then roll it outward and see if we can take some of those same skills and apply them into compassion towards others.
Can you talk a little bit, what is that, Steve? So when you talk about compassion for others, can you describe what that experience is?
I think the core of compassion is to recognize consciousness, that you see these are conscious human beings who are suffering, and sort of going behind their eyes, but then doing it in a way that has empathy, so you can begin to feel a little bit about what it might be like to be in that person's shoes, and that doesn't lead you to run away. So you need three things. You need to be able to take perspective, feel empathy, and not run away. And so that's the last part is part of what we're empowering with self-compassion. We're learning how to not run away from the world inside our skin. And then when we see the suffering of others, it's easier for us to step forward and not just turn off the TV or turn our head or pretend as though it's not happening and get overwhelmed. Instead, we can take the time to actually see if we can do something about the suffering of others. In the small ways, whether it's writing a check or being a volunteer or just helping in some way or just asking the questions of our neighbors or others that we see who are suffering, need difficulty. It's ancient wisdom. I mean, it's in all of our spiritual and religious traditions, but in the modern world, we've kind of lost contact with some of that wisdom. And I think this is one way into it, creating a more compassionate world.
Earlier before the show, you were talking about a workshop you were doing. Again, it was about perspective and seeing like an adult as a child. And it reminded me too, I had heard that like if someone is offending us and we're feeling judgmental or angry toward them, think about them as a child and maybe where they came from and how they might have been hurt or what their struggles were, their hopes and dreams. Can you tell us a little bit more about that element?
And
Steve?
In the workshop, I was actually doing what the president did. So this is an example, you can't run away, of actually reading the names and saying what some of the children who were gunned down in Newtown liked to do. And yet, a lot of us immediately moved into problem-solving mode of mind. What should we do about gun laws, etc.? We could get very judgmental towards that mother. Why did she have those guns? And then the killer as well, not seeing at all. This is a person who had Asperger's, who was so shy that when he gave a talk in high school, he couldn't get a sound out of his mouth. He just pointed at a computer screen. And in the talk that I gave, I put pictures of the children, but one of the pictures was that man who killed those kids as a child. And no, we don't forgive the violence that was done, but we need to remember that these are human beings. And in the various kinds of political things we get into, and people are afraid about, my guns are going to be taken away. That's a human being who's dealing with something that's real, and we need to get behind their eyes and understand that, not just objectify them. Or a person who's saying, no, we need better gun laws. Same thing. We have to find a place where we can communicate with each other as human beings. And I think what you're learning with anxiety, if you open up to it, hold it, and then carry it forward, is something that you can learn that I think will soften some of the dialogue and help us carry the burden of the modern world, which includes exposure to a lot of painful events.
What Dr. Hayes was saying is to not be afraid of going inside and listening, and hopefully we'll find two things inside. And one is a sense of deep compassion for ourselves, where we're not judging ourselves, but we love ourselves, we like ourselves, we respect ourselves. Because a lot of anxiety is caused by judging ourselves harshly and feeling ashamed of who we are. So instead, having that inner wisdom for guiding us, and the other thing, of course, is deep self-compassion. That I'm okay, I'm not perfect, but I'm okay. A couple of other things that we want to take a look at in wrapping up is, if you'll turn your page to the story of the Golden Eagle, there are two parts to this that we want to take a look at in wrapping up. So in the story of the Golden Eagle, and I'll just summarize it rather than reading it, So a golden eagle egg was found by a man who owned a farm. He took the egg and he put it in with the chickens. And the chickens sat on it, and so the young eaglet hatched and grew up with the little chicks, and he thought he was a chicken. And so he spent his first several months or years as an eagle running around, picking earthworms and trying to fly and just flying a few feet in the air because that's all he thought he could do, just like the chicks. And one day he looked up in the sky and he saw this beautiful big bird up there flying high in the sky and circling and diving and gliding. And he goes, wow, who is that or what is that? And one of the older chickens said, well, that's the eagle, the king of the birds. And he said, my God, how great would that be to be an eagle like that and fly like that? But then at the end of the story, the eagle lived and died a chicken, for that's what he thought he was. And so one of the key things here for those of us that have problems with anxiety, because we haven't had self-compassion, we haven't believed in ourselves, is we haven't had enough self-respect and enough self-validation to say, I'm okay, I can do stuff, I can face my fears, I can face my anxieties, and gosh darn it, I'm going to have a life. Viktor Frankl referred to that as the defiant power of the human spirit. So I refer to that as good basic humility, where we're humble and we're not being arrogant, but we know, gosh darn it, I'm an eagle, I'm worth something. I was put on this earth to accomplish certain things, and I'm going to do that. We don't have to do big things like Gandhi or Martin Luther King or anybody like that, but I've got my own destiny to fulfill, and I'm going to do that. So thinking of ourselves and knowing that we're a golden eagle and not running around thinking that we're a chicken. Then the last thing is, down at the bottom is living a life of intention. I'm going to read the last few paragraphs, and then we'll finish up. So living our life based on our intention. So instead of our anxiety making our decisions, I make my decision based on who I say I am and who I want to be. So I intend to be my best and do my best today. With integrity and courage, I take full responsibility for my actions. I intend to make my life better. I intend to make life better for all people that I encounter today. I know my true values and I intend to do my best to live them. I realize I have much to be grateful for and I want to share my good fortune with others. I am optimistic. I do my best to make and allow good things to happen. I realize every life is good plus bad. I endeavor to make good things come from bad or painful experiences. I am a loving, compassionate, and kind person, and I show kindness and compassion and behave in a loving manner towards all others today. If someone does something to harm me, I forgive him or her. If I do something to harm someone, I honestly admit my mistake and I make amends for the harm I have done, and I ask for their forgiveness and I forgive myself. I have talents and gifts and I use them enthusiastically in creative and productive ways to contribute to a more wholesome life for my family and my community. So, in wrapping up, let's be compassionate with ourselves. I'm okay. I may tend to be a more anxious person, and that's okay. Do our breathing and be grounded, centered, and balanced. Do Nike therapy and don't let our anxiety hold us back. Get out there and live the life that we really want to live.